Hey everyone, Congressman Mike Waltz here representing North Central Florida. This past year was unlike any other. I think we can safely say that. It was definitely historic. We have rising inflation. We have a crisis at our southern border. We have our adversaries on the march. We had brutal attacks on our greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel. We have protests now erupting all over the world. There was definitely never a dull moment and rarely a more consequential time for our country. But despite the dysfunction, despite partisanship that you may have seen in the media, we have delivered results for you, our constituency, and for Florida as a whole. And I just want to take a moment to make you aware of that. Let's walk down memory lane in 2023. There's some highlights from the past year. One that I am so proud of is our casework. It's one of my favorite parts of being a congressman. It often gets overlooked, and it's helping Floridians that I represent navigate the federal government bureaucracy. And so whether that's immigration, DHS, Social Security, the VA, any of those agencies, that's what we're here to help our constituents walk through. I have 3 offices down in the district, and I have an awesome team, really of dedicated Americans who have assisted our constituents every day, day in and day out. They take their calls, they help them with their cases, and the result has been over $6 million paid back to our constituents, money back into their pockets. They've completed over 1,900 of these cases. They've helped over 500 veterans and seniors do those kinds of things. They've responded in total to 10,000 constituents just this last year. It really is incredible. Again, I think it gets overlooked. It's a huge thing that we do here in Congress, and I just want everyone to know about it and my team to know how proud I am of them. These are what I call the day-to-day base hits. Our local projects, close to $12 million in grants was awarded to our district just this last year. These include grants from the Department of Education, the Department of Health and Human Services, agencies like the National Science Foundation. And what they do is they fund local projects, they fund critical research and development. Our awesome universities like Embry-Riddle, like Stetson, and historically black colleges and universities like Bethune-Cookman right there in Daytona. We also got a lot done on our water infrastructure, near and dear to every Floridian. Every Floridian knows the impacts of water quality, what happens when we have coastal flooding, what happens with our beach erosion, not just on tourism or our economy, but really on the way of life for our communities. We have to continue to protect the environment. It's what makes Florida so beautiful, what makes everyone want to visit, but also for us native Floridians, it's just our way of life. So this year, I introduced legislation to combat harmful algae blooms. We introduced legislation to increase funding for our clean water projects. We also successfully continued to keep oil and gas drilling off the coast of Florida. President Trump actually led the way with this with an executive order on the environment in 2020. We now have legislation that's codified a lot of that and really continued that effort. We have agriculture in Florida in a way that I think few people appreciate. It's actually the second largest part of our economy behind tourism. Our farmers and growers play a critical role in our economy. This year, I focused on protecting Florida's agricultural interests and industries and those who help, put food on our tables. We introduced and co-sponsored legislation to protect our sturgeon farmers, to protect our specialty crop growers. We also prohibited the purchase of agricultural land by foreign governments. No more Chinese Communist Party purchases of huge tracts of farmland. We also are protecting family farms. We can't let that way of life go by the wayside. And then finally, of course, the citrus industry, between hurricanes, between greening, a lot of development. We have to protect that citrus industry. We made steps to do that. All right, near and dear to my heart, education. The education of our children should never be taken lightly. I think one of the things that COVID exposed is what is going on in our educational system. I fought hard this year for parental rights because every family must, not should, must have a say in how and what their child is learning in school. We passed the Parental Bill of Rights to ensure that parents can do that. They understand what's going on in the curriculum. They have transparency in the curriculum. I also co-sponsored legislation to protect educational freedom and opportunities for all students. And then finally, I will always advocate, I am a product of in my own youth, but we always have to advocate for school choice. Pro-life, protecting unborn children. Since coming to Congress, one of my top priorities has been protecting the lives of the unborn. I am proud to receive an A rating once again from Susan B. Anthony's Pro-Life school card. Of course, Susan B. Anthony is one of the premier national pro-life organizations. And look, I know it's controversial to many. These are lives, these are children, and we must always, as a government, as a society, protect the unborn. On China, the threat of China continues to grow. This is the most dangerous threat our country has ever faced. And I make a distinction between the proud and amazing and historic Chinese culture and the dictatorship that is the Chinese Communist Party. I am proud to have introduced legislation to ban the leasing of U.S. land to Chinese energy companies, to strengthen our supply chains, to stop the reliance on China and other goods. It is nuts that we no longer make antibiotics here in America. We are completely dependent, not just on another country, on our greatest adversary for our antibiotics, for the vast majority of our oncology meds, for all kinds of other critical minerals that make our economy grow. We have to bring those supply chains back home. In this past year, we made huge steps in that direction. It's critical not only to our economy, it's not just a jobs issue, it is a national security issue. In addition to China, I introduced and co-sponsored legislation to hold Iran, to hold Hamas, to hold Venezuela, and to hold Russia accountable for gross human rights violations, for their propaganda, and for their military aggression all over the world. You can't just keep giving them more and more lunch money. You have to show strength on the world stage. They are emboldened when they see weakness. They're deterred when they see strength. We have to continue to stand up to these brutal regimes. I also stood in strong support of our greatest ally in the Middle East, Israel. I co-sponsored and sent 20 bills and letters condemning Hamas and supporting Israel's absolute right to defend itself, period. And then, look, our border is out of control. It's a human rights crisis. We have millions of people from all over the world flowing across our border, being shipped all over the United States into our inner cities. But what's behind all of it? Aside from the bad policy and the open border policy that we're seeing from the left, and what's behind all of it are the cartels. These cartels are not like the mafia. They're more like ISIS. They're paramilitary organizations with heavy machine guns, with rockets, with armored vehicles, and they control now 30% of Mexico itself. They control our southern border, and they are making billions by pumping these migrants across Mexico and into the United States, by pumping fentanyl into our inner cities that are killing 100,000 Americans a year, more in a year than we lost in 10 years in Vietnam. Look, we have to start thinking about this differently. We have to start using the military's resources to help law enforcement go after this problem. No one is calling for an invasion of Mexico. What we're saying is our law enforcement agencies don't have things like spy satellites or like offensive cyber or drones that we should be using. The military has those things. So I've introduced legislation that authorizes military resources to help law enforcement get after these cartels, to secure our border, stop the cartels, and protect the country. Speaking of protecting the country on national defense, this past year, we held hearings that exposed critical race theory, divisive lessons being taught at our military academies like West Point, the Air Force Academy, and Annapolis. We had a lecture that was going on at West Point titled Understanding Your Whiteness and White Rage. It is, in my view, as a veteran, completely inappropriate. You leave your politics at the door. You're all Americans when you're on that tank, plane, ship. The only color you're worried about is red, white, and blue. I can promise you that's the only color our enemies are worried about. So we asked these tough questions. We got to the bottom of what's being taught to our future military leaders. And as a result, I introduced legislation to ban critical race theory at our service academies. And that legislation is going to the president's desk. And we held our military leaders' feet to the fire to demand that we return to a meritocracy in our military that is mission-focused and merit-based, period. We also took on what I call big government. Every day, we are fighting to protect our constitutional freedoms and to protect our rights as Americans. We can never take those for granted. It's my duty in Congress to ensure that the checks and balances that our forefathers intended are still in place and they remain strong. To that end, I introduced what we called the Painter Act. It would require all children of the president and the vice president to openly disclose their finances, much like the president and the vice president have to do. We also co-sponsored a bill to promote election integrity. Election integrity, voter confidence, popular American faith in our election is critical, something we can't take for granted, and this legislation would ensure that confidence stays in place. I want to tell you on a kind of a personal level, I was honored this year to retire from the U.S. military. I'd worn the uniform for 27 years in the U.S. Army in the National Guard. I retired as a colonel. Never thought I'd see that rank when I stepped into uniform as a young cadet from the Virginia Military Institute, but I was able to have the privilege to proudly put on that uniform to serve this great nation alongside courageous, brave servicemen and women as a Green Beret, as a National Guardsman. Today, I've decided to continue that service in Congress. Some days I don't know which one was tougher, but this great nation deserves everything that we can, and I will leave it all on the table to fight for all of you as hard as Washington as I did overseas in combat. So look, all of these things have made me tremendously proud to serve you, to serve my neighbors, to serve my community, to serve my nation in Congress. And please know that I will always keep in mind we the people. I take that very seriously. It's first and foremost. You all are the boss. I think too many people come to Washington and kind of lose sight of that, frankly. I'm here to deliver results for you. We'll fight through the partisanship, we'll fight through the politics, but at the end of the day, we've got to get the job done. We have to move the ball forward for our country. That's what we have to do in combat. That's what we have to do in business. You have to get results. That's what you deserve in Congress. God bless you. I salute you all. Thank you so much.